Hello everyone and welcome to the iSpring Solutions webinar. Thank you very much for joining us today as we are going to be talking about 5 steps to turning static and boring PowerPoints into engaging and interactive online content. My name is Paulina, I am a community manager at iSpring and I will be the moderator for today's webinar. As a speaker, I have invited our client Michael Cerantola, and he is the manager of interactive development at KnowledgeOne. Hi, Michael. Thank you very much for making it possible. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Michael has been our client for, do you know how many? Like 5 years or so, Michael? Is that correct?
Yeah, 5 to 6 years now. With
Yeah.
iSpring 7.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michael has done this presentation as a session on stage at DevLearn conference, and it really was crowded there, and everyone just loved it. So we really wanted you guys to also experience that and hear his story of using iSpring and making his content more engaging for his users. And I have also invited Sofia Nikulina. Hi, Sofia. How are you doing today?
Hello, thank you very much. I'm great. And you?
I'm great, thanks for asking. So Sophia is our technical support engineer, and she will be taking care of your question, guys, during Michael's presentation. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to submit them, and you should find the question box on the right side of the GoToWebinar panel. It should be somewhere on the bottom. And of course, as always, we're going to have a Q&A session. It will be conducted at the end of the webinar. But please don't wait till this Q&A session. Just send in your questions or comments. We will be more than happy to take care of them. And also, before we move on to the main webinar, I wanted to share with you guys that we have launched our special Black Friday sale, and it's on now. So let me please tell you really quickly where you can find more information about it. If you go to our main page, our homepage, iSpringSolutions.com, you will see this black banner at the top of the page, and you just click on Shop Now, and on the following page, you will find more information. And what's more exciting about this Black Friday sale this year is that we have discounts for our learning management system, and we usually never do that. So if you're interested in receiving more information about it, just send your email in the question box and I will get back to you after this webinar. Okay, so no more boring stuff at this point. Let me please pass the mic over to Mike and he will start his wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Paulina. Let me just share my screen. Okay, so minimize this. Okay, so this was a presentation as Paulina mentioned, I gave in Vegas at DevLearn. It was on October 26th. So basically, we're going to discuss how to turn static PowerPoints into more engaging and interactive online content. This is more of a case study that we'll use as an example to showcase a little bit of the before and after and some of the roles and processes we took in order to achieve this look. So without any further ado, here's a quick intro about myself. I've been working in the e-learning industry for over 10 years now. I began in the pharmaceutical industry and now I'm in academia. World of difference. I am an owner of a zoo. I have 3 cats and a dog at home, which causes me to vacuum almost obsessively. I'm inspired by clean eating and fitness. I have lost over 150 pounds in the last 10 years, and I'm trying to keep them off. And the amount of time I've spent on the computer, I wouldn't want to know the total hours. I'm a gamer. I'm always on my computer, so this was always a topic that interested me. So let's go on in a quick introduction of KnowledgeOne. So KnowledgeOne is a sister company of Concordia University in Montreal, We work with the professors to turn in-class content into online courses. This enables the university to have more students enroll, as we can fit a lot more people virtually than we can in the building. It also allows for people out of the city as well as the country to enroll and get some better education as well. So in the last semester, if my numbers are correct, we had about 35,000 online students enrolled in just the online courses, not in what is given in class. So in the past, teachers may have seen this as kind of a fear. They were initially apprehensive and thought this might be something that would maybe take away their jobs. But in fact, as the years progress and people are becoming more used to what e-learning is, it's actually really a tool to help the teacher do way more with way less time. So towards the end of this presentation, you should have a better understanding of how to analyze and separate content into more bite-sized chunks that we can use for mobile learning on the go. We'll learn about templates and why that's important and how they decrease production time. We'll also learn about interactivity, trigger animations, and the motion paths. We'll figure out how and why to use them and when, and best practices for today's overall modern learner. So a quick agenda, we're going to introduce the case study problem, and then the 5 steps we approach to make something wow. So the 5 steps: the material analysis, template design, chunking content, integration and building, quality assurance, and then we'll do a recap and the question period at the end. Of course, we'll also do a showcase of the before and after, and you'll be able to get a more closer look at how the course will be given to students in January. So a quick course profile of this course. This is a course called A History of Chemistry, From Alchemy to Modern Chemistry. It's taught by Dr. Sébastien Rabidou. It is a 13-week, 3-credit undergraduate course, and it has to launch in January 2018. We will have a pilot for the first term with 100 students, and depending on how this goes, we're going to increase the cap from 300 to 500. And just for a more background, we kicked off this project in April. So we have just about 7-8 months to get a 13-week course done for online learning. So the team mandate was that aside from the professor himself, we also had interest from the chemistry department chair, and he wanted to showcase this online course for the chemistry department of Concordia to further recruit more students into the online world. As I mentioned, it's a 13-week university course. It's live classroom content that needs to be converted to be able to be taught online with visuals, animation, and narration. As I mentioned, since this project kicked off in April 2007, it had a little bit of a crunch timeline for the amount and the volume that this course really is. Our estimated completion date is right before the holidays, and then that'll give us just a couple of weeks to make sure we fine-tune and polish everything before having the students enroll in January. So before I get into the nitty-gritty, let's do a quick course preview on how everything looks. So towards the end of everything, each course for Concordia has a website. Each student has access to their lessons, how much their assignments are worth, and where they can take them. For the remainder of this presentation, we're going to be focusing on the lectures of the lesson, and here are some examples of how this looks like in the end.
In this lesson, we will be exploring how the concept of specific gravity or density was tackled in ancient China.
I'm going to lower the audio just for a bit because it's not necessary for the visual showing. I just want to scroll through a few pages fast to show how this looks like. and with activities that we'll be talking about later on in this presentation.
The story that you will listen.
And how we embed YouTube videos and have extra exploratory content that is nonlinear. And we'll also be focusing on some panning and some animations for the sake of animating. So I'll close this for now, and we will take a closer look at the approach we used to get here, and we'll also look at where we started from. So in choosing the technology, I had decided to go with iSpring. The reasons for it being A, the crunch timeline, because we only had a few months to wrap this all up. We couldn't really go into something like Captivate that requires more time. We choose iSpring because of its full screen and visual quality in the final exported version, the ease of use, and the familiar interface, especially for being a PowerPoint add-on, and we'll add to that later on. And also the fact that using more of a common tool like PowerPoint can allow us to utilize the professor, excuse me, to help us integrate all of the content. I caught a little bit of a cold this last weekend, so I apologize if I sound a little bit congested. So here's an example of the initial material course content. So as you can see, we have a Word document where the professor would keep his notes, and it's very hard to understand if you have no background for this course or if you're just lodged into it. So this is something he used himself for speaking notes in class when talking to his students. If there was anything that he wanted to add on, he would add it on to this, and the next term that he would teach this class again, he would then show, let's say, for example, this highlighted part. So it's not very easy to navigate, and there's a lot of information, and there's colors, different font sizes, we don't know what that is, so obviously this was not meant for a student's eyes. We do, however, have his in-class PowerPoint lectures. So let me just open one of this. And this is what he would show in class to his students while he would be teaching his topic. So in terms of visual appeal, it's very basic and bare bones. There's no real template. It's pretty much what we would say as a thought dump. You can't really understand the importance of this unless you have the professor in class with you speaking to his words. If we would just take this as a copy and paste job and have this for an online course, it would be very difficult to have students understand the outline, the path, and what would be on any exams. So I'll just close this for now. So now that we saw where we came from and we saw a bit of where we ended, we'll cover the 5 steps for WOW, which we've done in sequential order. And by the end of this, hopefully you'll be able to have some takeaways to apply to your projects as well. So for step 1, we have material analysis. For all of these steps, I have split it up into 3 sections. There's a define, where I'll say what the step entails, the challenge on what happened as to why we needed this, and the method for how we approach the solution, I guess. So how do we port existing content from the classroom to online? And this is a very important part in the analysis phase. So although the professor is the subject matter expert for his content, we at KnowledgeOne are the experts in e-learning. So it's more of a collaborative approach between the professor and us. It's more like a team instead of a client and a vendor. We need to make sure we analyze all of the professor's initial content and brainstorm ways to create the engagement and the interactivity, where to put the quizzes and the flow for the course. The new course outline is the first thing that we work on, And once the flow of the outline is approved by both our internal team and the professor, we know we can then move on. We generally tend to not move on until we have agreeing on both sides, because that will reduce the amount of rework from misunderstanding anything. So although the professor has taught this course in a live classroom setting for many years, the current structure and flow of the course material, as we saw previously, does not really lend itself to an e-learning conversion. And it's important to educate people we work with that it's not a simple copy and paste job. And the way you would speak to a learner in class is not necessarily the same way you would speak to them in a one-on-one setting or in a visual one as well. When you're in class speaking in front of a whole bunch of students, you can pinpoint facial expressions, you can tell when you're losing someone or someone is confused, and you can build off of that. You don't really have this in a virtual setting, so the professor needs to be sure that his material standalone will be able to make the student understand and be able to pass the course without a lot of one-on-one help. So again, here's the same screenshot I showed, and this is something we kind of brainstorm with. Some of the professors use images, let's say from Google Images, and we have to make sure there are no copyright issues to use this. This could also be an idea to make stuff interactive from maps for the students to discover stuff at their own pace. We outline what's too much text, and we identify what could be quiz material. And then we also have to make sure on the text side that there's no font embedding issues in this case when displaying Arabic font on HTML5 platforms.
Michael, I have a very quick question from Peter. Improvement and additional content was done in Word. How will it be later when the e-learning is finished and offered to the students? You will be showing the example. Is that correct?
Yep, I will show an example of how it is. In essence, what we do is transfer everything from Word into a PowerPoint document, since iSpring is an add-on for PowerPoint. So we do a quality check with the Word document and the PowerPoint to make sure all of the initial content was carried over. And when we're sure it is, we publish it with iSpring to make it HTML5 compatible and also editable for the professor, which I'll touch base on a little bit later.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. So how did we create a new outline? So as I mentioned, we need a better linear flow from start to end. In class, you have, since I mentioned this is a 13-week class, students have maybe a 2 to 3 hour block per week. So you can't always encapsulate your full thoughts in a 3-hour block. Some subjects might take you 2 hours, and then you'll start a whole new topic in an hour, have to cut it short and continue it the next week. So we like to make an approach that makes you start a topic and learn it and end it before learning something new, so you have the time to absorb all the information. We also find the creative ways to add the exploratory and interactive content to pique the learner's interest and to also make things easier in terms of what you saw earlier as a glossary slide out. If there are more complex terms, especially in a chemistry or an engineering course, it's a lot easier for the student to have the glossary definition on screen than to minimize their their lecture or pause it, open up a browser window and search their own definitions. Then you also risk of them seeing the wrong definition and thinking the word is completely different. We also create clickable regions for learners to investigate certain topics at their own pace, and extra resources to help the learner retain information as much as they can. So here's an example of an interactive timeline we created where we had...
First of all, it is important...
I'm just gonna skip her audio. So we had way too much text on one slide, and we made sure with the professor that this wasn't, this was not subject matter that would be on a test. So in that way, we made an interactive timeline where students can click at their own pace to view different Chinese dynasties and learn the timeline from the specific course. And some of them have a glossary term as well. Since this project is ongoing, you'll see placeholders, but we have changed them for the actual course. So this was actually 6 pages of text, and reading 6 pages of text, not knowing if you'll be quizzed on it, and then realizing it wasn't on the quiz, we don't want to overwhelm the students either. So this is more of a fun fact, did you know type of thing that students can learn if they're interested and explore without it being presented all in one large block. So now that the material analysis is done, we are under the understanding that the professor and the internal team are in agreement, and we can move on to step 2, which is our template design. So how do we ensure consistency across multiple resources? And the biggest key here is templates and SOPs. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the acronym of SOP, we call them Standard Operating Procedures. So templates, in essence, are preset page layouts that harmonize with the global vision of a course. And we create them to reduce the time that the production team uses, so they don't have to recreate the wheel for every slide or every page or every lesson. The K1 visual designer begins the course by creating a website design that you saw earlier, and maybe a 10 to 15 page type layouts within PowerPoint. We use the same color theme for the 2 of them, so they mix and match well. And then we show them to the professor, get his take on it, make some edits, and when we know that they're approved, we then apply them to master slides in PowerPoint. So then we'll have a PowerPoint file with 10 to 15 master slides that each have a preset type of page layout. And I'll show you a preview of this in a few moments. And the challenge of this is that not everyone has an eye for design, especially people more on the content team who write out the text on the pages. So we start with the visual designer first, so he can create the global template, and this will then assist the instructional designers in choosing the page layouts that best fit the amount of text or images that they have to display on one slide. And they all coincide with the theme of the course. So there's a difference between what people call a glorified PowerPoint and a presentation that people might not necessarily guess was created in PowerPoint. No one wants 50-point font death by bullet slides. So here's an example of just a slide thumbnail of some page types that our visual designer had created. So people in content who work on the quizzes and the writing of the course and don't know design that well can create something that looks like a designer and without having to spend too much time thinking of where the alignment is and how things go. So doing a lot of the work up front like this may seem like it takes more time in the beginning, but in the end actually speeds up the course, especially if you're going to be using multiple resources throughout the project. So the method, we collaborated with the prof to agree on the central color theme, the font theme, and the style of imagery. We like to think of e-learning as a print publication. When you buy a magazine and you flip through the pages, not every page looks the exact same thing and the exact same way. Different layouts help structure different pages, and sometimes you have 3 images, sometimes you have 1, there's different amounts of text. So we want our courses to look like it's a stylish print magazine and not just that it looks like a Word doc that was formatted to work on a website. The visual designer hands off the templates to the instructional designers, the IDs, who don't have the design background, and then they follow the course standards throughout the storyboarding process. If they have any questions along the way, they ask us. It's clearly a teamwork. We collaborate back and forth, but this puts them in the right place to hit the ground running, as we say. So also, to help them out, and for those of you more familiar with PowerPoints and master slides, not everything you will use in a course can be placed in a master slide. So we also create a slide like you see in this image where we have a whole bunch of repeating images or repeating objects we use throughout the course, like labels and navigation text and close buttons, and like you see the glossary terms. So what we did was created that on top of the page types. So what we ended up publishing is a PowerPoint template with all the master slides along with this. This serves as a help for both the content team and the production team when they're integrating this later on to know even more standards. If you have a label that goes across 3 lines, we have a set size already, so you don't copy paste and resize, and there ends up being, let's say, a different height for all of them. We establish how the arrows will look like, how our interactive click boxes will look like, and our sources and everything that can't be in a master. Because in essence, if we did put this in a master, you would end up having 50 to 100 different page types for all the varying ways you can set up a page. This way, it leaves the amount of pages to a minimum, and it allows you to reuse elements that you know will be reused throughout the whole course. So now we completed step 2. The template design is done. We know the flow of the course. So now it's time to chunk the content and make it fit for the learning world online. So what is chunking necessarily? We create bite-sized components. So as I mentioned earlier, in a classroom area, you can have anywhere from 2 to 4 hour long blocks. In an e-learning setting, that really wouldn't work out very well. You have a lot less atmosphere around you to help keep you engaged. If you're staring at a screen like this for 4 hours, you'll definitely lose interest and start to trail off. So we shouldn't then expect the learner to sit down at home in front of a laptop for 4 hours without being distracted. So this is something that we have to take into consideration, and that's why we like to chunk or divide a 3-hour class into several 30-minute components, or anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes, that are easy to digest, especially for people now who take technology on the go or have small breaks in between their errands. So the biggest challenge today is the modern learner. So you see them all in the metro and the buses walking. We're all one of these people now. We have emphasis on visuals. Everything is always super pretty. We're blasted by hundreds and thousands of advertisements a day. We make snap-second decisions. Most of us have multiple devices and starting to have a diminishing attention span. We're untethered. We're on the go. We're going to work. We're going to school. We expect quick payoffs with regular rewards. And this has not always been the case in e-learning. So e-learning has had to adapt to make sure we keep our learners engaged. And a lot of what we like to say internally is to keep having empathy for the main learner. So throughout the creation of your course and while you're building it, try to think, if you were going to be taking this course, how would it make it more fun to you, and how would you want to be engaged to actually take this? So as I mentioned, they're always on the go. They don't always have 1 hour plus blocks to learn. You know, we're always multitasking. We're on the phone while we're taking notes. We're on the bus. So chunking content into something like 5 to 30 minute components allows a learner to, let's say, load one on the bus on the way home and continue learning without having to spend more time afterwards catching up. It also helps retain more of the course content and helps you learn more. If you have to memorize or if you have to take notes on a 30-minute topic, it's a lot easy for you to digest rather than having a 4-hour lecture in front of you and trying to decipher what's important and what isn't. And you know, we have new parents returning to school, or your children take naps, and it's a perfect, you know, hour, 2-hour block to just hammer out a few things in the middle of your day. And how do you make a lecture less static? So I find videos that aren't interactive are a lot like TV shows. And I like to compare a TV show with a video game. You may lose interest in a TV show faster than a video game because for a video, you're just staring at a screen and listening to stuff happen. If you're engaged in the content, if you're playing a game and you have to control movements or you even have to choose where to go, it allows you to be more invested in what you're learning, and you aren't necessarily becoming absent-minded and losing trail of where you're going. So if the narration stops and you're like, hey, what's up? Oh, okay, I have to choose where to go now. I'm controlling this. It's more engaging rather than having to sit back and, you know, have a snack while you're watching something. And the method for how we do this is we follow the approved course outlines that we've done from step 1. And what we like to do is start a section, you learn a topic, let's say about gold. And then you'll end the section without introducing a new subject matter, like silver. So that way the learner can digest all the information that he just learned before choosing to go to the next topic and starting to get overwhelmed. So this way they get to piecemeal it themselves, and it's easier to retain, take notes, and all of that. We try to weave in motion and we try to weave in motion animation and appealing layouts and images because obviously some of the material we work with is drier. Some pages are more fun and interesting than others, just like in all topics of life. So having stuff fade in or having a background image slowly pan across the screen helps keep a student engaged, and that it's not just a static screen without anything happening. You have to keep in mind that the professor isn't there in class to make sure the student is paying attention. You know, we don't want these students to fail taking online learning. We want them to succeed. So here was an example also of a chunked up content. It contains the title slide and it contains a menu slide which diverges into sub-navigation that the students can explore at their own pace. And we cover all of the topic, which in this case is Zeno's paradoxes, and it's 13 PowerPoint slides, and with all of the professor narration, it's 8 minutes long. So 8 minutes isn't a long amount of time. You can do that super quick, and then you can either choose to move on to the next one, take a break, do something else, write some notes, and come back when you feel more refreshed. I'm not going to play all of this, but just for a quick scroll through, we have a menu slide where you can choose to learn more. We have some videos and a summary for the video. We have pop-ups with quotes, with I will explain in our next section. And when the student is done, more pop-ups, sorry about that. And these pop-ups we use to go with the topic that's on screen. So everything in here reflects what you just learned here and listen to her narration. And then we end the slide, end the topic, and you're done. So you can close this and take some notes if you want and get ready for your next section. So we're over halfway there. We've done step 1, 2, 3. We have 2 more left, and those ones, well, I'm biased in saying they're more interesting because I'm from the integration side, so I'll let you decide for yourself. So integration and building for K1, KnowledgeOne, is just compiling all of the individual assets together into one file to create all of the functioning components that we've seen so far. So to further enhance retention of subject matter, instead of just having text on screen to read like this, we also propose to our professors to add audio and to synchronize text on screen and to fade in as the professor speaks throughout the course. This will highlight the third point, which is the importance of movement every now and again, and not being too overwhelmed with everything appearing at the beginning of the slide. So if it's a 2-minute slide, you'll see text box by text box, bit by bit, and it'll be a build-up towards the end. The challenge we had for this is professor narration versus professional narration. So my career in e-learning, as I mentioned earlier, comes from pharmaceutical and academia. They're super different because pharmaceutical is more of a client-vendor relationship. The client comes, we create a contract, they pay us, we use the budget, and it's all done. With professors, since it's more of a collaboration, there's no real, I guess, contract for the payment of this. It works based on royalties and how many students enroll. So we don't really have a budget for professional narration at the start of the project like we did for a client and a vendor relationship. So most of the times, due to this, the professors tend to narrate them themselves. And every course is different because every professor has a different style and method of teaching. Intellectual property is another reason why some professors would rather narrate their own content than having a professional narrator do it. As I mentioned, not all the courses have the budget to afford this. In this specific case, the professor wanted several narrators. Most of the course is done by himself and his TA, the teacher assistant. And then we hired a professional narrator for quotes. So the professor in this course used quotes, historical quotes from people throughout history that we touched base on in this course, and he wanted those to be professionally narrated. So all in all, we have about roughly 40% professor narration, 40% TA narration, and 20% for the quotes. And a challenge that we saw in this is, in my personal history, this was the first time that we've combined professor and professional narration together in one slide. You can definitely tell the drastic change in quality from having a professional narrator in a sound booth compared to someone at home with a headset microphone. So that's something we are going to investigate in the future and perhaps provide additional coaching to professors and tips and tricks and having them narrate easier, having them sound less monotonous, which is something I'm guilty of as well, I'm sure. So how did we do this? We try to allocate dedicated resources on each course so the overall theme and consistency can be maintained. But that's not always the case. We have several projects at once, and we don't always have one resource per course. So that's why we adapt by creating our SOPs, and we list out any course-specific related graphics or standards in a central repository that everybody has access to. So in the odd case that I become ill and we have to bring someone else on board, they can quickly access this SOP, see all of the historical standards throughout, and try to maintain that moving on. Also, because we have the templates in place, that will also help them make less errors in terms of consistency. And then we also have the ability to train professors in iSpring and using iSpring's managed narration, which saves a lot of internal production time having to sync the content. Most professors in university have a basic to intermediate understanding of PowerPoint, since that's how the majority of them display their content on screen. And because of that, and iSpring being an add-on for PowerPoint, it becomes very easy for the professor to help out because they're used to the program, and the learning curve is very low. So in about after an hour of showing them some new features part of iSpring, they're able to directly narrate on their slides and control the fading in of their images and their text and their videos. On a 13-week course where there's about 100 PowerPoint slides per week, that is a lot of time saved internally for internal budgets and resources, allowing us to help tackle other projects or make others even better. So we only really spoke, and we will only really speak on the iSpring/PowerPoint lectures, but just for an overall background information on our course portals for a university course, it's not only composed of the lectures, but we also have podcasts, discussion boards where students can talk to each other, textbook readings, intro videos from the professor, so they do see an intro video of them and then hear their voice throughout the lectures. So we do still have that feel of authenticity and personality in a course. It comes with quizzes and assessments that can be graded or non-graded, and a bunch of activities to help them understand the content better. So this is another screenshot. You saw it previously before. This is just how we style our course portals. So everything will always be in one place in the top, and the students won't have to keep a whole bunch of bookmarks. Everything is on one page, ease of use, ease of navigation. So that brings us to our last step, which is the quality assurance. We take pride at K1 in many different QA phases throughout the life cycle of a course. We don't want to wait until the end and then realize there's so much rework to do that it blows up the timeline, and it makes us put more hours on the project that we might not have necessarily had to begin with. So we like to do a content QA on every PowerPoint that we produce as it's being done. So it's more of a staggered waterfall approach. The content QA is done by the instructional designer. They look at the new PowerPoint, they compare it to the professor's in-class material, and they make sure that the flow makes sense, it matches the outline that we've approved, and that all of the original professor material was carried over into the new templates, and we didn't miss anything. Once that's done, and we've assured that all the content is there and we're not missing anything, and we don't have any more questions to ask, we move on to a design QA. And we normally do the design QA after the professor has narrated and synchronized his content, because there's always room for human error, that they might accidentally click something and move something or misalign an object. So when the course is narrated, then we do the design QA. We make sure the theme of the course from the visual designer was carried over. Nothing is misaligned, the images are in great quality, there's branching, interactivity, we get to see the pop-ups, the quizzes, is everything functioning properly? When you click previous and next, does it take you to the right place? And so on. And the challenge of this is that because we chunk so much of the content, we're left with so many moving pieces, iterations, and versions throughout this whole course that there are many chances for human error. So to help us reduce the aspect of having too many cooks in the kitchen, it's important to us that we manage our changes and we create these checklists to ensure that the consistency and the harmony is respected no matter how many people end up working on the course. We also make sure we track our change requests to make sure that they were done and verified and then deployed to the newer versions. Then we do a last final verification and or sanity check, as we call it. And if it's not ready, we just repeat the process until it's ready. So each department internally is tasked to perform their respective QA, like I mentioned, and we log all of these issues in a bug tracking software called Jira, which is from Atlassian Marketplace. And this allows us to see who the reporter was, if the status is still to do, or if it's being worked on, or they can tell us that it's in review and we can check it. And it also shows the priority. Is it medium, high priority? Is it a showstopper? So this also helps the integrator working on the project prioritize the ways he'll fix the issues depending on what's major and what's minor. So once that's done, we create a new iteration of the course. If it's ready, we send it to the professor for his final approval. If it's not ready, we restart the cycle, ensure no new issues were introduced, make sure everything is clean, and then check again, send to the professor. So that pretty much quickly covers the 5 easy steps. I'll go through a quick summary and recap. And this is pretty much the same exact chart, but I drew it as a circle just to give the fact that it's not only a linear step-by-step process, because depending on the timeline or depending on the budget or the scale of the client or how important it is, you can evolve these steps into a living process. Let's say you have 8 months instead of 2. Well, when you're done all the quality assurance and you have time and some budget left, you can take a look at your course back from step 1 and put yourself back into the empathy of the learner or your trainer or the trainee and say, how can I make this more fun? How can I make this easier to understand or more dynamic? And that's why we strongly suggest to professors we work with that we update the courses every couple of years to make it more fun, to also add in a lot of new industry standards, because we're in an industry where things change by the week. So this might be, 80% accurate now, or it could be 50% next week if this new software comes out and changes everything, or if they make HTML6. So it's important to always keep the industry standards and your standards as a common denominator. So best practices, I had these at DevLearn as a back and front PDF. If anyone is interested, I can definitely send the slide deck to you. It's pretty much just essential takeaways from the presentation. Always remember to analyze and ask your SME, subject matter expert, all the questions prior to starting production so you could reduce the amount of rework. You should definitely know your target audience, the age, their location, the demographic. Age is a big factor, and so is location. Are they in a rural area in a third world country? Is the data so low that you need to optimize your images to make sure that they don't go over their monthly data plan if there's no Wi-Fi? An important thing for templates is to make sure you start with the colors, the font scheme, and maybe 5 to 10 basic page types to quickly start off the project. And what we do is tell our instructional designers that if throughout creating storyboards, they realize that there's a specific page type they need that wasn't supplied to them in the first 5 to 10 we've done, they talk to the visual designer, and he will then make a new page type, update the template, and then we can use that moving forward. In the beginning, we tried to do 10 to 20 page types. We realized that took more time and we didn't use all of them. So it's good to start small and then grow as you evolve. It's important to chunk your presentations. I wrote 5 to 10 minutes here, but depending on the topic and the course, sometimes you have no choice but to go as high as 30 minutes. We definitely do not recommend longer than that. Anything over 45 seems to be more blended learning and not just solely online learning. Try to integrate all the content into a functional template. Use proper optimization for the target audience, like I mentioned on the demographic or location. Identify your interactivity and your animations. Identify your exploratory content, your videos, etc. And quality assurance. Check your work across different devices, different browsers, phones, tablets, different versions of Android, different versions of iOS. That is the biggest, hindrance with HTML5 is that we were so used to Flash being displayed the same way across all browsers that we sometimes don't remember to take a look, step back in the beginning and be like, okay, let's just look at the template on a mobile device and see if anything is wonky or if you have to finagle something to fit better in a certain ratio. Because you don't want to get to the end of your project and then open it up on an iPad and be like, oh, we have to do something about that, but it's 2 weeks to launch. We always try to make sure we take away all the big questions in the beginning so we don't have any unwelcome surprises at the end. As well, for key benefits of choosing iSpring, I have listed a top 10 on my mind. There's obviously the competitive pricing, and what Paulina mentioned earlier on the Black Friday sale definitely helps that up. Great for startups as well. The ease of use, it's simple to train the clients, especially with the familiarity of using PowerPoint. It has a great support team that responds quickly. I'm often emailing them with bugs and seeing if it is an issue or if it's a browser-related issue. And what's great about iSpring is that if it is an issue they can fix, they will fix it regarding to, let's say, compared to other softwares that either don't get back to you in a timely manner or just say, oh, it's not a bug, it's a feature, and close it at that. It reduces the amount of production time, at least internally. I'm not sure how many of you use this, but we like to storyboard in PowerPoint regardless of using iSpring or not. So when the storyboard is approved, instead of recreating all the assets, let's say in Storyline, we just publish the storyboard. So we're doing the work once up front instead of recreating it in another software after. So the storyboard becomes the final product in the end. As I mentioned, and as I'm sure you will notice, the superb visual quality in your browser for images is the best I've seen for a rapid authoring e-learning tool. The source file is also reusable to create accompanying materials. The professor can use, some of the page types to make marketing or even recreate stuff for in-class activities if it's more of a blended learning. There's the possibility of publishing as an HTML5, Flash, which won't be supported as of 2020. It could be on a standalone EXE. You could have it on an LMS. It's SCORM 1.2, SCORM 2004, AICC Tin Can compliant. And if you don't have an LMS, iSpring even has their own you can host it on as well. So there's tons of options for that. We have the customizable options for publishing, so you can play with the visual quality or the optimization of how heavy your project is based on where the course will be viewed. For example, we have a couple of clients we work with that have a very old LMS, and their LMS can only support packages up to 80 megs. So we have to make sure that once all our images and everything is high quality and published, the final LMS package cannot be 80 megs. And if it is, you can definitely play with the publish settings within iSpring to lower that size. There's a lot of versatility for more beginner people who are not so familiar with programming or rapid authoring tools. They have video players now where you can have a talking head side by side with a PowerPoint that's animated, which is great for having more of a personal approach. They have new interactions like dynamic glossaries or a flipbook and a whole bunch of timelines, so it could all make, it's more of an arsenal you can use to make your project more engaging and making stuff look less static and less dry. And the collaboration, obviously, when we work with professors, they're not always in our office, so we have a Dropbox, we send them the PowerPoints. Even if the client or the professor does not have iSpring, they can still work on the slides themselves, help us write stuff, and send it back to us, and then we can just republish it in iSpring ourselves. So it's great for alpha comments and great for reviewing prior to the final product delivery. So I hope I was informative, and I hope you all have some takeaways from this. I guess I will open it up now to questions you have.
The biggest takeaway everyone want to have is the slide deck that you used during the presentation. Is there any way we can make it available for our today's attendees?
Absolutely. Right after this call, I can upload it to a Google Drive and share the link. I can share the link with you, Paulina. Maybe you.
Sure, and I will forward it to all our today's attendees. Thank you very much, Michael. It's been a wonderful presentation, and we have lots and lots of questions. However, we don't have a lot of time. So, guys, I just want to announce that we will allow like 10 minutes for a Q&A session. So if you have to go, we will send the recording of this presentation, including the Q&A session, by the end of this week, someday tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So if you need to leave, please do so. However, be sure that you will receive a copy of the recording of our webinar session. For those of you who still have time, we will be more than happy to have the Q&A session, and I hope you, Mike, do have 10 more minutes to go over some questions that we received from our attendees. So let's start from the very first one. And a couple of them were about LMS. How do you deliver your online content? Do you use an LMS? And if you do, what LMS do you use?
Well, I joined KnowledgeOne about a year ago, so they have already had an LMS in place for about 14 years. They've built it in the past completely custom. We're actually investigating whether or not to invest in a new LMS or create another custom LMS, because as you can imagine, an LMS that was created 15 years ago, it's pretty much been a duct tape version to keep it up to date with all of the recent stuff that has happened in our industry. So for both the fields I was in, academia and pharmaceutical, it's very hard to convince clients and professors to use an open source LMS because of the intellectual property, because of the information that is stored. If ever there's a hack or anything, there's a lot of sensitive information. So in terms of us in academia, we have to have an LMS that is operated by us, and we can control everything internally.
Thank you very much. And the next one is from Landy. What has been your feedback from learners around voiceovers? Distracting or complementing?
Well, it depends on professional or amateur narration. A lot of the professional ones, they really add that engagement that helps you learn. But we've had a lot of mixed feelings based on, let's say, students who read quicker than you can talk. So they feel that the narration bogs them down a bit and maybe slows them down because they could have read it at a higher pace. Other people who don't necessarily like to read or like to go at a slower pace, like the audio, because then they can sit back and make sure they hear and absorb everything. And it also helps because most of the time the audio isn't the exact text on screen. So it's kind of like an extra resource to help you understand the content more than just reading the text on screen.
Thank you. And another question from Peter. So going back to the one that he asked about improvement and additional content was done in Word, how will it be later on when the e-learning is finished and offered to the students? So I asked this one, and then he added, after you answered this question, this is clear, but the professor had added content from one seminar to next seminar. How will be the process when the WBT is running and when he want to add something additional?
Okay, right. So once everything is approved, let's say for January, our deadline is December 15th. The professor gives us his seal of approval. We put everything on the website on our LMS that's internally. If there are any changes while the semester is live that are urgent, let's say there's a typo or there's a quiz question that's wrong, the professor will email us and we'll fix it as we go and re-push it live. But for any additional updates you would like to do, when the semester is over, we have an internal process where we email all the professors asking them, how did your class go? Did you get any feedback from the students? Would you like to add anything to your course? So we try to help them, remind them that they should in fact update it, and then we just kick off a new version of the project. We download the same files that we've had and we keep going from there.
Thank you. I hope that answers your question, Peter. And the next one from Peter as well. How do you take the challenges of handicapped persons into consideration during design process? Color problems, black-white weakness, etc.
Well, I know the American terminology because I come from the pharmaceutical in the States. They call it 508 compliance, but in academia they call it something else. I'm not entirely sure of the word, but it's becoming more and more mandatory now. So what we also have, I'm trying to see if I have an example of this that I can show you. We have a transcript. So
in this lesson,
if you have problems with audio, you can read all the text on screen at your own pace, mute the audio, and then you can also open the transcript to read at your own pace what the narration or what the narrator has said. Obviously, this does not answer the colorblind problems. We actually have two people on our staff internally. One person is red-blue colorblind, and another is green-yellow colorblind. So we try to send complex images to these people and say, hey, can you still understand the legend? But there's no foolproof way. On our quizzes, we do have several versions if they're graded for marks where we have extended timers. So if there's a timer for 30 minutes for a regular person, we extend the timer to 45 or over an hour depending on the amount of handicap the student has.
Thank you very much. So moving on to the question from Yvette. I create online learning videos that are 8 to 10 minutes long. It would be helpful if you can speak to how this process can be applied to learning with video.
Well, the biggest thing with video that I've learned with is file size and the interactivity. So back when I was in pharmaceutical, there wasn't really a way to add interactivity onto videos. But now there are some open source softwares and some other rapid e-learning tools that allow you to add interactions on top of a video, which I would personally strongly recommend to make it more engaging, or else you have the risk of maybe losing someone. But as you mentioned, you said your videos are 8 to 10 minutes long, so I don't think it's long enough to cause that amount of diminishing attention span. iSpring does now allow you to embed videos on a slide. So if you would like to do something like, let's say you have a content slide and then you have a slide that plays your video, and then you could have another slide afterwards with some pop-ups or exploratory content, that could be another way to tag team a video and a PowerPoint to make an even more engaging project.
Thank you very much. And let's jump to the next one from Fern. How would you add a pop-up transcript in iSpring like what Michael just showed? Is that doable in iSpring?
Well, the way we do it right now is our pop-ups are a hidden slide. So do I have an example? So what iSpring does, for those of you who aren't aware, is in the notes view of your PowerPoint slide, anything that you type in here becomes the transcript when it's published on the final version. So when we have a pop-up slide, we normally just duplicate the existing slide, put an object on top of it that looks like a pop-up, and write our text in here. And we hide this slide so that it's not available in the table of contents. So we just have to change the text in the notes box to reflect the text that's in the pop-up, and once it's published, it will seem like a seamless thing, and the transcript will change as you navigate to the pop-up.
Thank you. So the next question is about narrations. When recording narrations, what microphone do you use and what settings do you configure it to get great quality audio?
So that is a very good question, because we are currently struggling with that. When we use professional narrators, it's not a problem whatsoever because they're trained in how to use this. Normally, headset microphones are less superior than tabletops that have, let's say, a pop filter like a lavalier. But unfortunately, right now we are using headset microphones. And the reason we do this is because the professors are super animated now. So if we have a tabletop microphone on the desk, chances are they'll be talking and get so engaged because they're used to doing this live that they'll start to move around and they'll get super animated. And we don't have anyone supervising them while they do this. So after a 5-hour block, they come to us, oh, I recorded all of this. And then we listen to it and we can tell that the volume drastically changes. So although the quality for us has been better with a pop filter and a tabletop microphone, what we're currently using now is a headset that, actually I have one right here with the microphone. So we just keep something like this. So if the professor is super animated and moves around a lot, at least we know that the volume will always be at a consistent rate. We are working internally on making our own soundproof room, because working in an office, you have ventilation, and what we hear a lot is that the ventilation can still be heard in the background of our amateur narrators, whereas the professional ones make sure that they record in a soundproof room. So there is a change in that. So it's something that we haven't really decided on yet, but we're desperately looking into, because we want to increase the quality of the audio, because we feel that the audio is just as important as the visual.
Thank you very much, Michael. And another one about narrations. Does the e-learning team, and it's from Alice, by the way, does the e-learning team prepare a script, or do the professors wing it?
Yes, and this is a good point on how every professor is different. In this case, the professor has taught this for so many years. He had an actual script, and this is a great example of the transcript that I showed you on slide by slide. The problem with most of the professors I've seen so far is that, they say, I've given this course for 25 years. I know what to say off the top of my head. The amount of work it would take me to write a script for you would be, there would be no point to them. So they just like to wing it. In that sense, we cannot have a transcript, which also hinders some of the handicap requirements. So we're trying to find a way to encourage professors to script their projects, because during the storyboarding phase, let's say for this course, it was a lot easier to understand the content when you had a script versus a biology course we're working on right now that is unscripted, and we don't really necessarily understand the physiological aspects that they want to show on a storyboard. So we do recommend scripting is better.
Awesome. And the corresponding question, how is your experience? Are the professors willing to actually record narrations?
Most of the professors want to record it. Most of them do it because if they wanted professional narration, the contract we have with the university is that they would have to pay upfront. And the professors themselves only start to get paid for the course once it's being live. So most of the time, the professors, being part-time or having their own life, don't necessarily have the funds to pay, $5,000 to $10,000 on a professional narrator, which is something new to me since I'm used to the pharmaceutical area where we have a set budget for the narration. So the professors understand the need for professional narration, but they can't always provide the means to obtain it.
Right. Thank you. And the next question from Eric. What's the link between intellectual property and narration?
Good question. We have had some professors who felt that scripting their course would be in breach of intellectual property. And that is also a good point of why the majority of them decide to narrate it themselves. Intellectual property is a good point to bring up. I didn't cover it much, but in the case, if anyone is wondering, in the case of the professor leaves the university, the intellectual property is no longer ours. So if a new professor would come in to teach the course, we would have to re-narrate and redo the slides.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you very much for covering. And the next question from Eric again. Do you use iSpring for creating quizzes?
Yes, we do. We have several types of quizzes throughout our courses. We have non-graded quizzes. We have graded assessments that maybe count for 2 to 10% of your grade. And then we have the midterms or the final exam. The midterms and the final exam, we tend to not do them in iSpring, and we tend to do them directly in our LMS just because we have people out of the country who are enrolled. So they have to go to test centers actually to get all the quiz questions to do them. And we've done a midterm in iSpring recently for a math course, and the only issue about that is that we need an iSpring quiz for each timer for the handicapped students. So if there's a change in a quiz question in a midterm, we would have to make it, let's say, 5 times, one for the half-hour timer, one for the 60-minute timer. So with the 508 compliance, we tend to stay away from the 25% upgrades in iSpring. But the ones that are ungraded and the ones that are worth 1 to 10%, we definitely use iSpring to create them.
Thank you. And the next one I think is great. It's from Yvette. Can you speak to how this model can be applied to a small organization that only has one instructional designer responsible for creating all online content? Do you know?
That would reinforce the whole part about the template design. Since there's only one person you have to work on this, the added value of having preset page types that allows them to quickly create content and not have to readjust on every slide makes them go faster. And in the case of my older job in the pharmaceutical life, we had one template for all our courses. So after a while, you kind of got used to where everything goes, and you just have to change a color here and there. But The more practice you get with a set of preset pages, the faster you get to become, the less creating the wheel, and the more productive you are. What we do also, as I mentioned earlier, is have help from the client by having them narrate and sync while they narrate, so that alleviates the pressure from the internal team as well.
And by the way, iSpring also has another product. It's called Content Library. And within Content Library, some course presets with like templates are available. So you can use all the design, like the same design across all the slides that are combined in one course that can also shorten your development time and help just one instructional designer develop courses in a short amount of time.
Yep, you can see a few of these here, and if you have an active subscription for the content library, you can have way more.
Yep. Thank you, Michael, for demonstrating it. And one question from Kathy. What kind of checklist software do you use for debugging? What is their format and how are they tracked?
So it's a website called Jira. So it's from Atlassian. I think it's Atlassian Marketplace. Jira. Yeah. So you can either have Jira as a website that they host for you, or you can download it on your server. And essentially what it is, I'll just go find the screenshot where I was before. It allows multiple users to log issues based on category and assign them to people in your team. So you're able to choose when you make an issue, is it a graphic issue, a text issue, a narration issue? You get to have an assignee, and when you assign it to someone, the system automatically sends them an email. So it's kind of like a central repository to make sure everything is in control. Because as you can imagine, the amount of issues we log for a 13-week course is a lot. So we don't want them lost in emails or in some Word document on someone's desktop. We like to keep them global where everyone could access and see the progress on how the course is working.
Thanks a lot, and I hope that answers your question. And the next question is from Emilio. Besides the narration, Michael, do you keep the text available to the student in the iSpring text space?
Yes, we do, and also sometimes for added value and for some of the handicapped students, we also export the PowerPoint as show you as notes page, PDF, as a PDF, and we use the notes slide. So that way you have an image preview and all the text. That gives you a PDF of all your slides, and using iSpring, we can attach it to the resources of your project. So in the end, you'll have an extra button here next to transcript that would say resources. You can click it for a drop down and the PDF would open in a new tab. The students can save that, read it on the go when they're, let's say, in a subway without internet access or something like that.
Thank you very much. And sorry, so I'm not sure if you can disclose this information, but there is a question from Peter. How much money you had to spend for this course, chemistry? Was there a set budget?
The set budget, we work internally with a number of hours. So because internally we also have 3, I would say, stages of a course. There's a level 1, which is the more basic type. We have a level 2, which is more animated and fluid, which I would say this falls as a level 2. Then we have a level 3, which also adds gamification and leaderboards. We had roughly a budget of 1,200 hours to make this course. And we're a little bit over budget right now in terms of hours because this is also one of the first times this company is using iSpring for a course, so we're learning it, but at the same time, it's a learning curve for a lot of people in terms of e-learning where they come from Flash. So they're getting used to how to leave the Flash environment and go to a more, I would say, simple, because it's a lot faster once you get the hang of it. So our next course, which we've kicked off like this for biology, we have a budget of 1,000 hours because it is a 10-week course instead of a 13-week course. And so far we are in budget and we still have about 300 hours left.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And the next question from Judy. The click boxes, pop-ups, etc., are they part of iSpring or are they implemented through and in PowerPoint?
They're implemented within PowerPoint. The entire presentation I showed you today is made in PowerPoint without using any of iSpring's interaction. So essentially, when you click on an object that you want to link to somewhere, you can press Control-K or right-click and say Edit Hyperlink, and you could choose a web page, or you could also choose a place in the document. So this is where you would activate your hidden slides or your pop-ups. If I would want this one, see, all my steps are hidden slides and they don't appear in the table of contents. So when I click on step 1, the box is set to take me to the hidden slide that you wouldn't see. So it's a bunch of transparent boxes that you overlay on top of your elements, and you can just tell it where to go when clicked, which doesn't require any, action script programming like in Flash. So it's a lot easier to use for people who don't have the programming background.
Mm-hmm. And a question from Lynn. Is there a particular playhead that you prefer over others?
A particular playhead?
Playhead. I'm not sure what that means, and if you, Lynn, can provide a little bit more information, could you please do so?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand. Playhead. Playhead. Is that like the overall player for iSpring? How everything is done in the end with their player?
Yeah, somebody just says that. I think he means player.
So in this case, we had the visual designer make the template for the course. As you saw, there were specific colors that he kept. There's a lot of browns, there's a lot of greens. So what we did in the end, trying to get back to my, the GoToWebinar is in the way. Sorry, 1 minute. So we took these colors that were approved from both our visual designer and the professor. And when you're ready to publish your PowerPoint for HTML5, you're able to customize the colors. And that's when you really have the fun part, to either choose one of their pre-made ones or just change all the colors you want yourself. So for this course, we had more of a dark gray background, and it's really easy to change everything dynamically.
So, Aline says, iSpring player versus the PowerPoint player.
The PowerPoint player, we try to make it match the course itself. So that's something that the graphic visual designer does at the start of the course, and then we brainstorm and see if we like it or not. And then if so, we use that, show the teacher. If the teacher likes it, then internally that's our okay go for the colors and the fonts. We try to keep it the same but change it every module, so it's not a lot of work, but at the same time, not every course looks the same way in terms of colors. We do want the functionality to be the same in all our courses, because we don't want a student to sign up for 2 different online courses and have them function completely different. So there's a functionality consistency we try to keep, but there's also the colors and the overall theme that we like to play around with from course to course, so they look a little bit more tailored to the professor.
Thank you. And the next question from Eric. Is it possible to have an idea how much you charge for generating, say, a 10-slide presentation from, say, a Word document? And if you like, I can ask Eric to send his email address and then you guys can connect. Or if you want, you can say this information out loud.
Well, it's hard to say based on, are we going to add any interactivity? Are we going to create images or download some from Shutterstock? Are we doing a conversion just directly as is into iSpring? A 10-page Word document really doesn't seem like, a lot of manpower to do. It could be done in like a day or two, not even. But unfortunately, I am not part of the administrative side of the company, so my knowledge of our pricing sheet isn't, I don't want to put my foot in my mouth, but I can definitely forward the request and get you a more approximate price if that would help you in any way.
Yeah, please let us know, Eric, if you would like to have it, and we will get back to you after the webinar. All right, so and let's cover the last question because we are way over the time limit that we set for us for today. From Yvette, do you have any advice for creating e-learning for adult learnings, age range 40 and up?
Not a lot of text on screen. I would definitely suggest narration, and I would definitely suggest visuals that can coincide with helping you understand the text more, not just abstract images, but if you're going to talk about a time period of Italy or a frame in China, we should have an image that can reinforce that concept. Or if you're talking about DNA, there should be a real image for DNA that can help the learner visually piece together the terminology. Also, I would suggest maybe less interactivity than what you would do for someone in their 20s, because depending on the age now, people in their 40s and 50s are not as familiar with technology as people in their 20s and 30s, so there would be a little bit of a difference there in terms of how crazy you want to go with exploratory content. I would probably be more simple so it wouldn't overwhelm someone who's new to the whole online learning world as well.
Thank you very much, Michael. And just the very, very last one and the simple one to make sure from Cecile, do you have to hide the slides so if the end user skips through slides, it wouldn't show up as you would if you click through a PowerPoint, so they don't see the same slides twice?
Right. So you're right, and that's what the hidden slide will do. It will make you skip it when viewing your presentation if you don't click on the object that sends you to it. But there's an element in iSpring called the Presentation Explorer where you can choose specifically where to go when the user selects next or back. If I wanted to, instead of going from slide 10 to 11, I can make it go from slide 10 to 43 when they click next. So it really allows you to branch out into more than one path, and you could make it all lead back to each other, or make, let's say if you have a process for a manager and an assistant manager, and the processes are almost the same, but the manager maybe has a couple more things than the assistant manager would not. You can have a pop-up where you can choose whether you're an assistant manager or a manager at the start, and those would branch out into their own slides. So although previewing it in PowerPoint alone will make you skip hidden slides, publishing it in iSpring with some of your own custom slide branching options will allow the learner to see everything that you want them to see.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Michael. And at this point, I think we're ready to conclude this webinar. I would like to thank all of you guys for participating in it and for sending all of your questions today. And since it's Thanksgiving week in the United States, I would like to thank all of you for being with us and not only participating in the webinars, but also checking out our products and sharing your feedback and sharing your opinion on iSpring and just basically sharing what you think works best. So this was partially Michael's story. So today he was sharing his story with you guys, his case of using iSpring. So again, thank you, Michael, very much.
Very welcome. I hope everyone learned something new, and thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
All right, so I just wanted to remind you that next week, November 30th, we are going to have a webinar on how iSpring works in Moodle LMS. So I will be sending the invitation on Friday. So you're guys more than welcome to participate in this webinar. And thank you very much, Sophia, for taking care of the questions in the chat during the webinar as well.
Thank you very much for a lecture. It was really interesting to hear.
All right, so at this point, I would like to wish everyone a wonderful day and a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll see you next time at our next webinar. Thank you, guys, and enjoy the weekend. Bye, Michael. Bye, Sophia. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Goodbye.